Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. Hello everybody, welcome back. Today I have my August reading wrap up. So this one was a doozy. I read a lot of books in August and I also didn't vlog a ton, so I feel like there's a lot of books here that I want to talk about that you haven't even heard my opinion on. Unless you follow me on Goodreads, then maybe you've seen a star rating or something like that, but I haven't really reviewed a lot of these for you. The fantasy romances I probably have. So let's go ahead and get into it. So I read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I read 13 books in August. Most of them were fantasy romance and historical romance, with a couple being adult fantasy, 2 were adult fantasy, and 1 was contemporary romance. So let's go ahead and get into it. So the first book that I read is Embers in the Snow. This book is a fantastic vampire fantasy romance that I freaking loved so much. I gave this book 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. I think this is one of the best vampire romances that I've read in a really long time. I love this hero. He was so completely gone for the heroine from the get-go and stayed that way the whole way through. I just adored their romance. That really is the shining star in here. Although I do think the fantasy world was interesting in here too. Our heroine is in an arranged marriage, presumably to our hero's dad. She is very much dreading it. She doesn't want to be married to him. It sounds like he's a very terrible guy. And then, lo and behold, she ends up finding out she's actually going to be marrying his son, who she thinks may be even worse. He's got a very dark reputation. He, can't look in mirrors. He can't, he's got all these things that people are like, what is going on with him? And it's interesting because this is the type of book where vampirism is not necessarily an established concept. So it's kind of hidden from humans, so that was really fun as well. And I just have to say there are a few things I love more than a good vampire romance, and this delivered. He felt like Edward from Twilight, but grown up and better. I loved how protective he was. I loved how gone he was for her. I loved that there was something about her blood that appealed directly to him. I also liked the overall fantasy plot of this, although at times it did seem to slow down, especially once our couple got established and they were a couple, then the fantasy plot kind of took over, and I didn't feel like it was quite strong enough for that, so I wish there had been a little bit more tension before they fully got together, because I kind of can start to lose interest at that point. But my love for this vampire romance and the hero and this couple was so strong that I still gave it 5 stars, but that is just a tiny little detail and I was like, I wish this had been different, So I really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. I thought it was fantastic. Okay, now the next book that I read is House of Bane and Blood. So this is a fantasy romance that I so enjoyed. I gave this book 4 stars, and honestly, I feel like this one is actually probably a 5-star read. Like, I read this early on in the month and I just cannot stop thinking about it. So I'm going to go ahead and bump my rating up to a 5-star read because I just loved it. I loved it. Now, I will say the fantasy world in here is a little bit shaky. The magic system in here is also not fully developed or fully explored, but I really loved the setting of this, which is a post-industrial type of setting combined with like steampunk type of concepts, and our characters have magical powers divided into different almost like categories, kind of like the Grishaverse, and that's how this book is pitched, is very much like Grishaverse meets Peaky Blinders, and I think that's so accurate. So if you like those things, I love that time period. I love Gilded Age. I love like close to the Victorian time period. I love it so freaking much. And I also love the Grishaverse, so I was completely sold on that, and I particularly like, again, this hero in this romance. This hero, Nico, is such an alpha mellow. Like, he is very strong, very bold, very protective. He is hard and cold at first, but not overly so to the heroine, like in a way that makes it seem like he has this sense of civility towards how he should treat a woman, but it's very clear that he, doesn't really have feelings for her. So watching that go from like civility to tenderness was so good. I loved it so much. The basic premise of this is our heroine, Mila, she is from a family who is on the brink of financial disaster. Her family's railroad company is going to be bankrupt if she does not wed this inspector at the time, and that's going to solve everything, but she really doesn't want to marry him at all. So in comes Nico, and he has a deal to make for her that he will swoop in and marry her, clear off the debts from the inspector, and then she won't have to marry him, and so that's what she goes with, that option. So it's a marriage of convenience, and it is a very slow building romance that is just beautifully done. Like, I loved this romance so much. This is a couple that I still think about. This couple, I actually feel like I think about them a little bit more even than Embers in the Snow, even though I loved that romance, but just because this delivered so much of that slow building feelings that I want in a romance. Like, I want the descent into love to be fully realized. Like, I want to see every aspect of them falling in love. I don't want them to hurry and fall in love and then I get to see them together. That is not interesting to me. That's not really what I want in a romance. I want to see the falling in love, the struggle to get there, even, you know, the pain and things like that's what I want. I say pain only because I want there to be an element of struggle so that when they do get together, it feels sweeter. It feels like accomplished. If they fall into love too easily, I don't feel like I'm fully invested, you know? So this gave me everything that I wanted from that aspect. I really truly love this romance. So yeah, I have talked about it a lot. I've said it's 4-star read, but you know, thinking about reading it at the beginning of the month, now we're at the end of the month, I still think about this couple. This is one of my favorite books I read this month, so it's a 5-star read. No doubt about it. Okay, now the next book that I read is A Love Letter to Whiskey by Candy Steiner. So this is a book that I've been meaning to read ever since it came out. Like, I was a huge fan of Candy Steiner when this was published, which I believe was like 2016. I still really enjoy Candy Steiner. I don't enjoy her newer stuff as much as I do her older stuff, sadly. So I had really high expectations for this, but it's one of those books that I've been like kind of afraid to get to. I wasn't sure that I was gonna love it. Like, I felt like I would, but I also felt like it had potential to disappoint me. and I did end up being a little disappointed in this. So this is a contemporary romance that is very angsty. It has cheating, it has a lot of drama, a lot of over-the-top drama, a lot of unnecessary drama. And, you know, if I had read this in 2016, I maybe would have liked it better. But now I'm just sort of like, you know, I'm here for drama and dramatics, but I don't feel like drama that is unnecessary is anything that I'm really interested in. And so much of the drama in this was self-manufactured by the characters self-sabotaging or doing things deliberately that they knew was going to cause them pain or was going to cause them trouble. And I understand that humans in general are bad at that. A lot of humans, everyone basically, self-sabotages to some extent, you know. There are things that we know we shouldn't do and we continue to do them. But this just didn't really work for me. However, all that being said, it was a compelling read. I still love Candy's writing. I think she's a very easy author to get swept away in a story with. I just wish that there had been a little bit more reason for the non-stop breaking up and cheating in this book. Like, I say there should be a reason for cheating. Like, and the only reason I say that is because there are a handful, no, there is one book that I have read that has cheating, and it's by Candy. It's her other cheating romance where I feel like I understand that, you know. This one I didn't really understand at all. I feel like this just felt like a bunch of 17-year-olds, even though by the end of the book I think they're almost mid-30s. I don't know exactly how old they are. It just felt like you should be a little more grown up. You shouldn't continuously be making these same mistakes, you know? So I didn't love this one, but I didn't hate it, and I do see why it's so popular, but the constant breaking up and cheating, the cheating specifically, made it really hard for me to really root for these characters. It made it hard for me to get on board with either one of them individually or together, because, I mean, that's sort of like a moral line, you know? Like, am I going to feel like this is somebody that I can root for when I've seen how they treat people who care about them? That's a tough one, you know? So I didn't love this one. 3 stars. Okay, now this one is my most disappointing read of the month, and it was a book I was very much anticipating. So this is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. I've read one book by Ava Reid before, and I really loved it. It was A Study in Drowning. I thought it was beautifully done. It was very dark. It was very eerie. It was very, very thoughtfully written and very interestingly put together. I liked that book a lot. And I'm a huge fan of Lady Macbeth. Macbeth is my favorite Shakespeare play. I studied that in high school and I continue to be interested in it. And so it's something that I revisit throughout the years, way beyond high school, just because I find the story, the characters to be so fascinating, specifically the characters, the choices that they make, who they are, and what they do. And very specifically, Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is an icon, you know, she is such a fascinating character in Shakespeare. She is manipulative. She is not going to let anything stop her to get what she wants. She is driven, she's manipulative, she holds nothing back. She is conniving, like, she is a fantastic character. I just love her. I think she's such an interesting character. I don't know if I should say I love her. I like her character. I think her character is so fascinating. Like, I don't know a better word for it than that. So I was very much anticipating this, and truthfully, I know there are some people who have said that this book didn't really bother them because they don't know a lot about Macbeth and they weren't really comparing it, but I gotta say, if you're going to title your book Lady Macbeth, I feel like you should maybe make her a little more faithful to the original, you know? Is that just me? Like, I don't know. I mean, even if this had... Okay, star rating 2 stars. Was disappointed. Was severely disappointed. I left a very long review on this, talking about how disappointed I was with the direction they took Lady Macbeth specifically. They completely changed her. This was a complete character assassination. I don't know what would possess someone to take such an iconic, strong, feminist character and dilute her down to this version, which is a 17-year-old French girl, and that's important because she continuously rags on the Scottish people, and, you know, and she is Scottish in the play, who is nothing but a pretty face, and whose eyes, you know, curse men. I feel like there was nothing about her that was even closely resembling Lady Macbeth. So then that begs the question, why would you even write a Lady Macbeth retelling if you're going to change her so significantly? Like, I think it's one thing to take inspiration and to tell a story and shine a different lens on it, but that's not what she did here. And all of that aside, this is not a convincing narrative in and of itself. The writing in this is so incredibly dry. We feel so far removed from the characters, from the story, from the plot. And I was a big fan of her writing in A Study in Drowning, so this was a huge miss for me. I really was disappointed with this, and I feel like 2 stars is being generous. So, moving along. Okay, next up I read City of Mirth and Malice. This is the second part in the duology of I cannot remember the title of this series, The House of Bane and Blood. This was book 2 in that series. So this one I gave 4 stars. I didn't like this as much as book 1, and I think that's because most of this book they're separated, because at the end of book 1, something happens to separate them, so this book has them apart, and they're both trying to work on how to get back together. So I don't know that I want to say anything more I feel like that may even potentially be spoilers for what happens in book 1, but I still really enjoyed this. I loved the moments when our couple was together. I loved this book did go further into the world building and the magic, which I really, really liked a lot. And I just overall just really loved the vibe. This hero, man, he was out of his mind in love with her. So I really enjoyed this one, and this one is a solid 4-star for me. Not as good as the first, but still really excellent. Okay, the next book that I read is The Marquee Whomus by Courtney Milan. So this was a book that we read for the Rake Appreciation Society, which is mine and Jen from the Book Refuge. This is our historical romance book club. We started this in 2020, and we took a pretty long hiatus because I felt like I needed a break, and now we're back doing it seasonally. So this was our summer session. We had 2 books, so the next 2 books are what I'm going to talk about there. And then we are going to be doing this in the fall, and that will be in November. So I'm going to have a books I want to read video coming up soon, and I'm going to announce those books. So if you want to read with us, please do. Okay, so The Marquee Whomus is book 2 in this series, The Wedgeford Trials, I believe. I'm not entirely sure the name of the series, because you know how bad I am at remembering those. But Courtney Milan is a fabulous author. I just love her books so much, and I really, really love this series. So this book was a 5-star read. Actually, this was a 6-star read. I adored this romance. This romance has our heroine, Naomi, I think is how you say it. She pronounces it phonetically in the book, and she makes a point to show the Asian pronunciation versus what we would say it like the English pronunciation of Naomi, and I believe it's Naomi. I should have looked it up, I apologize. But she wants to be a paramedic, basically. It's called an ambulatory. She wants to take these classes, she wants to help people, but her parents are really kind of against her, and she ends up going, you know, kind of against their wishes to go and sign up for these classes, and she gets there and they're like, oh, well, either your parents or the man in charge of you has to sign you up for these. So she's kind of devastated because this was like her one last chance to do that, and she sees this very tall, very imposing Asian gentleman who has just shown up, and she thinks that there may be some type of a connection. She's supposed to meet him, take him back to her parents, but she kind of puts him on the spot and says, oh, well, this is my fiance, and he plays along beautifully. Like, he does a really wonderful job of playing along with her, and they end up going back to her home village where her parents are, and he actually reveals who he is. His name is Kai. He's not the young man who is here that her parents wanted her to go and meet. He's here for his own needs, which is to try and work on his father's business, to try and do that. Now, his father was a member of this community, and he was basically a swindler. He swindled the whole entire town. So Kai is back to try and work on that. And that's all I really want to say about that, because that is definitely a significant plot point that is a reveal at the end of it. So there is this sort of agreed upon we're fiancés, and I'm going to keep saying that so I can take these classes, and, you know, so maybe you can have a better place in society because everybody kind of hates your dad. And they ever so beautifully and gradually fall in love. Now, this is one of the best romances that I feel like I've read in a really, really long time. I loved how, even though they were set in this very much like a marriage of convenience, you know, not even marriage, like fiancé ship of convenience together, they're kind of using each other for their own purposes. There's something about Naomi who wants so badly to be loved and to be cherished, but she feels like she never will be able to. One, because she doesn't feel like she's beautiful, and, you know, she doesn't feel like she's really done anything worthy of that, and she's seen her mother and thinks that she's just gonna have a life where no one will ever love her. And so she has this opportunity now with Kai, and she starts to feel that he may have some feelings for her, and she wants to act upon it. She wants to embrace it fully. And Kai, sees Naomi, and he can't really, even from the get-go, he can't really understand and imagine how she sees herself so poorly, because in his eyes, she is just this wonderful woman, and he sees all of the good aspects of her. And there were so many tiny, quiet scenes in this book showing this very gradual, beautiful descent into love, which I was talking about earlier. Like, that's why I read romance. I want to see every step of them falling in love, every single step. And I love that that's exactly what this was. This was a full picture of these two falling in love so beautifully, so gradually, and the way that Kai always saw the best in her. And the way that he made all of these tiny gestures that were kind of tiny, that weren't necessarily huge romantic gestures, but spoke volumes about how he sees her and how he cares about her. It was just beautiful. So I loved this book so much. I think this is maybe my first 6-star romance of the year. I adored it. I thought it was fantastic. You know, I have been pretty stingy with my 6-star reads. I think I've only given out, like, I think this is maybe the 5th one. And I loved it. So if you are also looking for that type of romance that shows very small gestures that say a lot and that build one upon the other until they get to the final moment where they both are ready to accept and admit that this person loves me, it's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. I feel like this is the best parts of romance. This is the parts of romance books that I want more of. I loved it so much. Like, I can't wait to reread this because it was perfect to me. So, okay, so then the next book that we read for the Rake Appreciation Society was Tempted by His Kiss by Tracy Ann Warren. So this is a book, this is a historical romance, and it came out in the early 2000s, I believe. And I gave this book 3 stars. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, I felt like it was just fine, it was just okay. It has a very familiar setup where our heroine is, she ends up on a carriage ride heading somewhere traveling, she gets snowed in, she stops at this manor house, which is where our hero Cade is living, and he is a man of, you know, kind of very damaged man. He's got kind of a bad reputation, and he has a lot of trauma in his past, and he very reluctantly agrees to let her stay in his house while it's storming and they can't go anywhere. And that was really the best part of the book, was them snowed in together. I felt like it was really beautifully done. They had really good banter. They had a really good setup. They had a really great opportunity to kind of get to know each other and feel feelings that are, you know, where attraction is included, but there are also some things that they're recognizing about the other person that speaks to more than just, hey, you're hot, you know, like I liked that a lot. But then once the snowstorm ends and things separate, they end up compromised, and they have this fake engagement basically to save her reputation. And his whole theory is, we're going to have a fake engagement ship because then hopefully this will attract other men to you who will then want to make you their wife. And that whole concept just seemed a little bit out there. I was just sort of like, in what world does that make sense, you know? And so from that point on, things kind of started to go downhill, where it felt very contrived. It felt very like things were happening just for the romance reasons that didn't necessarily make sense, and I never really felt fully on board with the romance because it very quickly devolved into lust only, and I just don't like that. So this one wasn't terrible by any means, but it certainly wasn't stellar, and I gave it 3 stars. Okay, so now this next book is an arc. I have been requesting more arcs. and I'm happy about it. But also, like, they've all been coming in recently, and it's freaking me out. So this is one that I read on a weekend kind of quickly, and it is The Ashes Masquerade by Madison Michaels. So this is a new to me author. This, I believe, is like book 2 in this series, so this isn't the first book in the series, and I do feel like this series probably needs to be read in order because I felt like I was missing some context of the world and the situation and things like that. So this has our heroine who, you know, is going to have to be married off to somebody who is wanting her fortune, essentially. Her parents are very wealthy. They're going to try and find somebody to marry her because of how wealthy she is, and she doesn't want to have anything to do with that. She wants to work at her dad's business, which is like a lumber yard. And that's what she wants to do. So when she kind of ends up doing that, our hero enters the picture, and he's the one who is her father's apprentice. He is sort of like the star of his father's business, you know, and that's how they end up kind of in forced proximity close to one another to fall in love. There is an overarching mystery in this book that they need to team up to try and solve, and at times I do feel like that kind of took away from the romance, and I just feel like this one was fine. This is another book that I gave 3 stars. This one was fine. There was nothing that was really grabbing me. The characters didn't feel super unique. The romance didn't feel what I was looking for at all. It felt very standard in a lot of ways. So even though there were elements of this that felt like fresh or that they were combined in fresh ways, it still felt sort of like I've read this a million times before, you know? So I was kind of disappointed with that one. However, the next book was not a disappointment. So this is a reread. This is This is My Darling Duke by Stacey Reed. This is a reread for me. I first read this in 2020 when it was first kind of being popularized, when historical romance was having a moment on BookTube, and I loved it so much. I really, really loved it back then. I haven't revisited this since. I am a huge fan of Stacey Reed. I really love her romances. I think she does an incredible job at building beautiful longing and yearning in her books. Like, I feel like she is specifically good at that. So if you really like longing and yearning, you definitely need to read her because she captures that better than just about anybody else I've ever read. So this book is a classic. This book is probably her most popular, and for good reason. So this was the book that we picked for my Fable book club, which is Most Ardently. The link, if you want to join, is in the description. And it's a text-based app where we have a book. We pick a book each month. You guys get to vote on it. I put some selections out and you guys vote on it. And then throughout the month, you can read at your leisure and, you know, comment as much as you want. You know, depending on how much people participate in the comments in the chapters, that's how well the discussions go. And because it's kind of a new group, I feel like we're kind of still trying to find our footing about having a lot of commentary in there. So if you want to join next month, I'm about to announce the book for that, and I'd love to have you there with us. So My Darling Duke is a fantastic historical romance. So it begins with our heroine Kitty, who knows that her family needs financial help and her sister needs to find a husband. So she takes it upon herself to create this persona where she is engaged to be married to the Duke. Now, the Duke was this wonderfully accepted man. Everybody really enjoyed him. He was engaged to be married. And then a very tragic accident happened, which put him in a wheelchair and scarred him horribly. And that caused his fiancée to break up with him, and he's kind of been cast out ever since then. So Kitty thinks that it's going to be a good idea to just say that he is her fiancé, because what's he going to say about it otherwise? And she thinks this is going to put her sister in a good position to marry. So this is a very interesting self-sacrificing move on Kitty, because when word gets out that this is not true, she's going to be ruined. So she's basically putting herself, you know, essentially on the cross so that her sister and everybody can have a happily ever after. And I think knowing that right off the bat really makes her a very endearing and a very character that you can love very easily. And our Duke, likewise, you know, he's got a lot of bad things that have happened to him, and he is a surly guy, but he is also, from the get-go, so willing to be vulnerable with Kitty. Like, when they meet, their first meeting is so good. I love the way they first meet, and how she is so cautious in a way, because she's like, hey, I know I said that you're my fiance, but she's also so willing to help him and to see good things in him. And likewise, he is very much, you know, he's not opposed to her at all. He's actually very intrigued when he finds out that this girl is like, oh yeah, she's engaged to you. That's what everybody's saying. He's like, what now? but he's very intrigued. And when they meet in the beginning, it doesn't take long before he's really allowing himself to be vulnerable and to open up to her and to trust her in a way that makes it easy for her to see the best in him and to see beyond what he is and what he wants people to believe. And they start to fall in love, and it's just so beautiful. This is so beautiful. This is one of the most deeply romantic books that I've read in a really, really long time. And it is more like of a reminder to me to go back and read these books again that I've read and loved in the past. These that I maybe have, because I had forgotten so much about this book. And it is just so beautifully romantic and sweeping, and I love it so much. So I feel like most people have probably read this, and I had too, but it was so fun to go back and reread it. And there were a lot of people in our group who hadn't read it before, and that was really fun. So, okay, now this next book is one that I'm very excited about. I loved this book so much. So this is The Finest Print by Erin Langston. This is an ARC that I got. This book comes out in September, I believe September 24th. I'll double check on that and put the date on the screen. I love Erin Langston. When I first read Forever Your Rogue, I was like, holy crap, this is an author to watch for. I think she's just so incredibly talented, and I just love everything that she has written, for sure. So this book is featuring family members, descendants of the family that we knew in Forever Your Rogue. They are connected in that way. So this is Belle. Her father is Gavin Sinclair, who is the judge at the time. And the book opens with her ending her engagement to, I believe he's a deputy constable at the time or something like that. He's in the Scotland Yard. And she ends the engagement, even though it's a very good societal match, she ends the engagement because he did something that really kind of crushed and destroyed her dreams, and something that was deeply personal to her, which is she is a novelist. She's writing a novel. And the book that she's writing is, full of gore, it's horror, it's sort of like a crime novel. Like, that's the type of book that she really likes to write. Because her father is a judge, she often will accompany him there, and she will watch the court cases, and she writes down anything that she finds inspiring to use in her novel in the future. So she ends her engagement, and her ex-fiancé, is very, very bitter about that, and he comes into play later on in the book. So years pass, and she's trying to get her novel published, and she can't, and she's feeling very, very frustrated about that. One day she is at the courthouse, doing her usual thing, and she sees this strapping, handsome, rugged American man walk in named Ethan. Ethan came to London because he had heard that his uncle had passed away and left him a printing press, basically, a printing shop. So he goes to hopefully make a new name for himself, have a job, have an income. He's very much a self-made man. And when he arrives, he finds out that his uncle actually left him this, yes, but also left him with a crippling debt, where if he doesn't get this debt resolved in a matter of like 10 weeks or something like that, then his creditor is going to take it away from him and he'll be left with nothing. So Ethan suddenly feels like, okay, I gotta try and find a way to pay this debt back and make this a viable business. And he meets Belle at the courtroom office. They have a pretty good spark-filled chemistry first meeting. And he realizes, when he finds out that she's an author, that there's something he could actually use her for, and it's basically writing penny bloods, little crime-based pieces of fiction at the time that were very popular, and he's hoping that that is going to save his business, and it will also allow her to get her name out there. So, that's the basic gist of the plot. They're then thrown into forced proximity. And again, this is another book where I feel like the descent into love is so beautiful and so slow and so tender, and there are so many moments in this book where they are like very close together doing something that ends up being very romantic, which originally wasn't, and it was just so incredibly lovely. I loved this book so much. I love the setting, I love the family, I love the characters. There are side characters in here that you get to meet. I loved seeing Belle. This book feels like it is feminist without saying that it's feminist. Like, there's nothing about this book that is out there saying, well, women can't do this or women can't do that, but everything that Belle and Ethan do are so respectful of each other's agency, but Ethan wants nothing more than for Belle to have the choice of what she wants to do and how she wants to live her life, and Belle feels the same way about Ethan. Like, she wants him to have every choices available to them. So I was really curious to see what was going to be like the final conflict in this book, And I was so happy with what happened and how it resolved, because it didn't feel like it was unnecessary at all. It felt like a very perfect culmination of what had been happening up to that point. So I loved this couple. I feel like they're a perfect match. I think that Ethan is so perfectly made for Belle. They just seem like they fit together perfectly. I loved it. I loved the romance. It was very sweet. It was very, very romantic. Like, this book is full of those small romantic gestures that I just love so much. Like, I posted about it on Instagram when she traces a finger down his sleeve and he like immediately almost like combusts at the time. Like, oh, it's full of those. It's full of those beautiful romantic moments that just get me every single time. I loved it. 6 stars. So that's 2 6-star romances in the month of August. Wow. Okay, so now the next book is a new fantasy romance that I have read, and it is Blood and Steel. So this is a really interesting concept. So the concept in this book is basically that women are not allowed to hold a sword, to wield a sword. They are not allowed at all, because there's a prophecy saying that if they do, then the whole kingdom will basically fall and crumble. So our heroine is, you know, she also received a prophecy when she was a child that says that she's not going to live past her 27th year. So when the book opens, she's 24. She knows she only has 3 years left to live, and she wants nothing more than to be a warrior. She wants that so badly, but it's not something that she can do at this time. However, an opportunity arises that allows her to go and train to be a warrior, and she's under the care of one of the warrior, basically, guardians, who is going to oversee her training and things like that, and that's the romance between the two of them. I really love this world. I really love the setup. I love the characters. I love the writing. I felt like this was just so fun. And if you like a very strong bad A warrior type of heroine, I think you would really enjoy this too. And a slow burn romance with a broody hero. Okay, the next book that I read is Between Wrath and Mercy. This is an adult fantasy romance that I've been meaning to read for a really long time. This was the book that we picked on Patreon to read as for our book club book, so I have an exclusive reading vlog with my full in-depth thoughts on Patreon just for patrons, and we have a live show that we're gonna do about this one. And yeah, so if you want my full thoughts and review on that, you'll have to go to Patreon. But yeah, moving right along. Okay, the next book that I read is Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. So this book actually took me all month to read. I was kind of just picking away at it over time, and I really loved it. I gave this book 5 stars. This is book 3 in the Stormlight Archive. I'm trying to get all caught up so that I will be ready for Wind and Truth when that comes out in December, so I only have 1 more and 1 novella, I believe, to go. And this book very much follows Dalinar, he is basically the general who kind of has had a little bit of a fall from grace in the eyes of the people who feel like, you know, Dalinar is having these visions and he's not entirely sure what's real and what's not. He was a very powerful warrior, a powerful general. People thought he was, you know, going to be the savior of their kingdom. And then he starts to have these visions and things happen with, you know, the king. He didn't protect him at the time and he fell. And so this book is very much Dalinar's book, and he is an excellent character to follow. He's so fascinating. He has this strong moral center, but it's so clear that he still very much struggles with that. Some of the choices that he's made, some of the choices that he's had to make that put him in situations that make him feel like he's not the man that he knows he can be or that he knows he should be. And that's just such an interesting character journey. So I loved this book. The ending completely made up for what felt like a little bit of a slow middle. I feel like of all of the 3 that I've read in this series, this one, the middle was the slowest for me. And I think that could be because I didn't get a lot of Kaladin. I really love Kaladin. I loved his character journey in books 1 and 2. And this one very much focused a lot on Shallan and Dalinar. Dalinar very specifically, and I mean we do see Kaladin too, so I loved this. This one was a little slower for me in places, but the ending definitely made up for it, and I love this series so much. I can't wait to do a full review once they're all done, once I've read them all. I'm very excited about that. So alright my friends, there you have it. Those are the books that I read in August. I hope you all enjoyed this video. Please let me know what your favorite book was that you read in August, and if you've made it this far, feel free to leave me a book for Ethan and Belle from The Finest Print, and I'll see y'all in my next video.